Amidst the news that the Coyotes and therefore the Roadrunners could be moving, I'm here to tell you that hockey absolutely works here in the desert. And I'll talk about that on this edition of Locked On Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Jason J.D. Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for over a decade. I've been covering minor league hockey for about that long. I'm also currently the public address voice for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. There, for those of you that want to hear the voice. And also helping out with Defend the Nest. All, by the way, Sunbelt teams, which I will get to momentarily. But before we get started, this podcast is brought to you by Indeed. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for the quality apps that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to begin hiring now. Terms and conditions apply. Okay. This, folks, is a very important topic that I do want to talk about, and I think it's important that I talk about it here in the desert, here at Acrisure Arena. And this is going to deviate from the norm because this is usually Locked On Anaheim Ducks. But this story is too big to not talk about. And especially since the Anaheim Ducks are a Sunbelt team, I think it's important to talk about. The news came out Wednesday afternoon that the Arizona Coyotes very likely could be moving to Salt Lake City. And in fact, here's what's actually going on. So Frank Zaravelli put out a tweet early Wednesday morning, and this is what it says. Sources: the NHL is drafting 2 schedule versions for next season, one with the Coyotes in Arizona and another with the relocated franchise playing in Salt Lake City next season. It is April 2024. We're looking at a possible whole new team taking place in Salt Lake City just 6 months from now. Think about what I just said. 6 months from now, the Coyotes might no longer be a team. The Tucson Roadrunners might no longer be a team, and I'll get to that in a second. And it is a fluid situation, lots of moving parts, and there's a lot going on with dual paths. So first, I want to talk about what exactly is happening. So there was a memo put out that two scenarios could play out. If the Coyotes do move, they would be relocating to Salt Lake City, taking place next season. But there is one Hail Mary for the Coyotes. And I'll actually go with the updated article from Daily Faceoff. And I'm going to quote it as is. The Arizona Coyotes and Smith Entertainment Group have made significant and meaningful progress on an agreement that would see the Coyotes franchise sold and relocated to Salt Lake City, Utah. The machinations of the potential deal, which would have a renamed and rebranded franchise playing in Salt Lake City in October, are mentioned in the original story from Wednesday morning. But the NHL sent an updated memo to the Board of Governors on Wednesday afternoon amid media speculation. Sources said Coyotes players have been informed a verbal agreement is in place, but we have received pushback on that characterization of talks. No deal has been completed. There's a lot of work to be done, and it's complicated and will involve many layers and lawyers. Stay tuned. So that's directly from the Daily Faceoff. So what this means, the NHL has a backup plan. And I don't know what the backup plan is. Is the backup plan in Phoenix? Is the backup plan in Salt Lake City? I know Gary Bettman so desperately wants to make hockey work in Arizona. He's been at this for 28 years. Yes, it's been 28 years since the original Winnipeg Jets moved to Phoenix at America West Arena. It's been that long. Since then, The Coyotes have gone from America West Arena to Jobbing.com Arena in Glendale to Mullet Arena, a supposed temporary home on the campus of Arizona State University. 3 homes in 28 seasons. That is never a good look when you move that much in about 3 decades. It's never good. And by the way, there is also news that there could be potential names for an NHL team. That report came out earlier this week. So they are soliciting potential names for a team in Salt Lake City. And there's a lot of paths. And the one that the Coyotes are on now is that Coyotes owner Alex Marullo is putting pretty much all his eggs in the basket of an Arizona State Land Trust auction, which is scheduled for June 27th. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that Alex Marullo made is and I know that my colleagues at Locked on Coyotes talked about this earlier on Wednesday. I listened to some of that podcast. But when I saw that, I also thought it was ridiculous that he would go to Land Trust, because that usually does not end well. It usually doesn't. When you put all your pins and hopes on an auction, there's a real possibility that it doesn't end well. And why the June 27th date? Because that is right around the NHL draft. But I should also point out that we have seen something like this before. And I go back to May of 2011. I did do a story on this, and I have to dig up this story. I do have it somewhere. But I did a story about this back in 2011 when the Winnipeg Jets were in the middle of gaining their franchise from the Atlanta Thrashers. And what I remember the most about this was that there was the consensus that the Atlanta Thrashers were likely going to play their last game, and at least the fans in Atlanta got to say their goodbyes for those last couple of games. And by the time it was April, it was very widely known that the Thrashers were going to move. This feels like desperation, and this feels like a last-ditch attempt to try to get the Coyotes to stay in Arizona. Waiting till June 27th, that seems like too far of a point. And I think the reason he has that date is it's going to look bad either way. And I think Alex Marullo is hoping that the NHL is willing to wait that long, which would guarantee at least one more year at Mullet Arena. And this could go one of two ways. The NHL could decide by May that, you know what, if there isn't a relocation and sale by late May, then waiting till a June land auction, it at least ensures that the Coyotes would stay at least one more year in Mullet Arena and then have an entire year before they move. If the sale does work out, there is still going to be a lot of steps to get an arena built, but at least that is a fast track to get an arena built in Arizona. If that auction does not work out, then they are as good as done, and they will have a lame duck season in Arizona. And I think the NHL have to think about that. You know, what is worse? Is it worse to have a lame duck season in Arizona, or is it worse to just have the NHL by May say, no, you know what? We have a sale, we have a relocation, let's move them now in May. And it does kind of screw over the fans of the Coyotes, but it might be a move that has to be made, because the Coyotes have had their fair share of controversies. They've had their fair share of failures over the past 28 years. And it's unfortunate because, Arizona, the fans of Arizona, they deserve better. Hockey can work in a non-traditional environment. I mean, look around here, and I'm being completely dead serious. Look around here. Look at this beautiful arena in the middle of the desert. with a very successful team. And I know I could go like really off the rails here, but you know, Acrisure Arena, the Firebirds, this is proof that hockey can work in the desert, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but we're up against it. So we're going to go to the first intermission right now and talk about how did we get here? How did the Coyotes get here in the first place? And why am I talking about this on Locked On Ducks? I'll tell you why on the other side. Now a brief word from Factor Meals. And folks, you could eat stress-free this spring with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to eat in just a couple of minutes. Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up for your springtime goals. It's tailored to your schedule. Customize your weekly meals with the flexibility to get as much or as little as you need. Pause or reschedule deliveries to suit your lifestyle. And we're celebrating Earth Day all month long. Look out for the Earth Month Eats badge on the menu for our lowest carbon footprint meals. So head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 and use code LockedOnNHL50 to get half off your first box plus 20% off your next box. That's code LockedOnNHL50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 to get half off your first box and 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. So let's talk about how did the Coyotes get here? Well, they moved from Winnipeg back in 1996 because there was a lot of stuff going on with the Canadian dollar, and Winnipeg was losing a lot of money. In fact, multiple Canadian teams were losing money. You saw the Winnipeg Jets move to Arizona to become the Coyotes. You saw the Quebec Nordiques. They moved to Colorado to become the Avalanche, and they're now one of the most successful franchises in the entire NHL. So at least the Nordiques moved to Colorado. At least that one worked. But the move from Winnipeg to Phoenix, that was a weird one to begin with. And the reason that move even happened is because of Wayne Gretzky. I'll go back even further to 1993. The Los Angeles Kings made their run to the Stanley Cup final against the Montreal Canadiens in 1993. And there was a certain movie that came out around that time that y'all may have heard of. You may have heard of this movie. It's called The Mighty Ducks. And you may have heard of D2, The Mighty Ducks. Both pretty successful movies as far as kids' movies are concerned. And what spawned from that? A franchise in Anaheim that was known as the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim and is now known as the Anaheim Ducks. You see how we went back to the Ducks here. And because of the success of the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, yes, the Mighty Ducks would be considered an early successful franchise. They made the playoffs early on. One of their first playoff appearances was against, drum roll please, the Phoenix Coyotes. Yeah, we're going back to the mid-90s when you had that sweet, sweet jersey matchup between the Coyotes and the Mighty Ducks. Elite jersey matchup. I think that was when we had the Bulin Wall. By the way, the Ducks did win that series. Sorry, the Mighty Ducks did win that series behind Paul Kariya, behind Temus. Like, those were good teams back in the late 90s and going into the early 2000s. And I know there was some skepticism back then. Does hockey work in these non-traditional markets? The Florida Panthers, they went to the Stanley Cup final in only their 4th season. The Rats thrown on the ice. The Tampa Bay Lightning are one of the most successful Sun Belt franchises. They're in a non-traditional market. The Anaheim Ducks, they're in a non-traditional market. They share a market with the Los Angeles Kings. And even though they've had some rough seasons, they are still considered, in the long run, a successful team in a Sun Belt area. And you can't deny the fact that the Ducks are, like, they're a fine team organizationally. I'll give credit to the Samuelis. They've kept the team, they've kept the team going. This is a rebuild, but there is also a sense of a lot of hope for this young Ducks team, and they're going to get better. And soon enough, the Ducks are going to come back to great relevance. It is going to happen soon. But the Ducks are considered a team that is going to be successful. I mean, they won a Stanley Cup back in 2007. They had that Cinderella run in 2003. So it works in all those other spots. So what's wrong with the Coyotes? Well, they've had very little success. Their best success was in 2012 when the Phoenix Coyotes made it all the way to the Western Conference Final, only to get upended by the eventual champion Los Angeles Kings back in 2012. And since then, it has just been a whole slew of crap. They've had one controversy after another. The Coyotes had bankruptcy. Yeah, that was bad. After 2003, the Coyotes relocated to Glendale and, at the time, Gila River Arena. Then a couple years later, in 2005, Jerry Moyes buys the team. And then he put the team in bankruptcy. In 2009. So the NHL had to step in and take over the team and signed a short lease extension with the city of Glendale. It didn't go over well. So then there was an ownership bid to buy the team, and it just went to the wayside. Like, it didn't go through because there was litigation threats happening. And then in 2013, 11 years ago, the league threatens to relocate the team back in 2013. And then Glendale signed a 15-year lease to support a new ownership group, Renaissance Sports and Entertainment. And that's when they changed the name from the Phoenix Coyotes to the Arizona Coyotes. Okay, big whoop. Then Glendale voided that long-term lease in 2015, just 2 years later, after a violation of laws. I think it was like conflict of interest laws. And then 2016, the Coyotes announced that they would move to the ASU campus in Tempe, but the building wasn't done yet. So they had to enter into a contract with AEG, and that's when the Murillos took over, like shortly after that. But even since then, they've had even more problems because, they have an arena in Mullet, which it is a party arena, but there has been so much other stuff going on. I think one of the biggest ones took place when the Coyotes had to forfeit draft picks because of combine testing violations. This was back in 2020. They forfeited some second and first round picks because they violated that policy. So then and also there was a fine of no less than $250,000 for each violation. They were accused of doing illegal pre-draft testing for over 20 prospects from the CHL, the Canadian Hockey League. So that was a big violation. So once the Coyotes were finally able to pick in the fourth round, what do they do with that pick? Yeah, they drafted a player that it didn't go over well. They drafted a player named Mitchell Miller, who was a very highly rated defenseman. But in 2016, Miller was convicted in an Ohio juvenile court of bullying and abusing a black developmentally disabled classmate at school. And he was actually convicted of this. And the worst part about it is, they never apologized for it either. So Miller was punished. He did get suspended, and he was convicted. And this was a widely known thing that happened. And the Coyotes With their first draft pick, they looked past all of that and decided to draft him anyway. And then they had to rescind the draft picks. So they not only violated and lost draft picks, the pick that they did have, they had to rescind it, and it's like a lost draft pick. So it's just bad press, bad decisions all the way around. That one is not a good look for the organization. And it's only gotten worse. Once the Coyotes moved to Mullet Arena, a less than 5,000 seat arena, all the naysayers were coming out once again. And I understand that. I understand why the naysayers came out, but it's not a good look. Unfortunately, this franchise has gone through crap over and over and over again. So it's not that hockey cannot work in an environment like that, because it can. Look at Anaheim. It totally works. This is bad ownership. It is bad all the way around. And if the Coyotes do move to Salt Lake City, that means that the Roadrunners would also move as well. The Roadrunners might be a lame duck team next season because it is going to be a very quick turnaround. But the rumor that I was kind of hearing was that if Arizona goes, Tucson goes as well. And Phoenix is not going to want to replace them with a minor league team. And the new Utah team would want to keep their AHL affiliate close. So where could this new affiliate move? They could move to Utah. Maybe they could do what San Jose does and have an NHL team and an AHL team there in the same market. They could have an ECHL market go down to, or go up to the AHL. Utah might lose their ECHL team. So the only other ECHL team that's even remotely close to the area would be the Idaho Steelheads. Maybe Idaho could join the AHL. I'm not so sure about that one, but there's a lot of possibilities for a new AHL franchise. So we'll see where that ends up taking place. All right, we're way past it, so we're going to head to the second intermission right now, and I'm going to talk a little bit more personal about why I think hockey absolutely works in the desert. We'll get to that on the other side. Now, a very brief word from Indeed. And Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you could do it all with Indeed, because they do the hard hiring work for you. Sponsor a job and they'll match you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your description right when you post. With Indeed, you can start hiring fast. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for the quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. All right, I know that I usually talk about Ducks hockey, but this story is way too big to not talk about. And considering that I am the PA announcer for a brand new team in the desert, by the way, I thought I would get a little bit personal with you, the fans. And I know there's probably going to be some Firebirds fans watching this too, so this is going to get very personal. But I'm truly of the belief that hockey can absolutely work in the desert. Think about maybe not so much the Coyotes, because the Coyotes have had their attendance issues. There were times a few years ago in Glendale when the Coyotes were the worst attended team in the league. They were averaging for a while, less than 50% attendance in Glendale. So the Coyotes, maybe not the best example, but I think what is a good example, the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Look how successful their team is. They have had sellout after sellout after sellout. They made the Stanley Cup final in their first season. Similar to a team. And they just won the Stanley Cup final. In fact, they're the defending Stanley Cup champion. And part of the reason for that is it's their team. It's an original team. It's an expansion team. It is a team that brought a community together, and that was the first professional team in that area. Never mind that Las Vegas already had, believe it or not, they already had a rich hockey history. The Las Vegas Thunder from way back when. The Las Vegas Wranglers from the ECHL days. Their wacky midnight games, by the way, which I have stories, which maybe I'll talk about with fans if they come here next weekend. But there's some doozies of stories from the Las Vegas Wranglers and their bizarro midnight games and their bizarre promotions, which I still loved, by the way. So Las Vegas is an environment, but it works because it's their team. It's their expansion team. And everything that happened with the Vegas Golden Knights happened organically. Kind of similar to what happened here at Acrisure Arena for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. And my apologies to the Ducks fans, but this is going to get a little more personal here. When I found out that Palm Springs, or the area, Coachella Valley, was going to get a team, I'll admit I was skeptical for about 10 minutes, like 10 minutes. And then I was like, no, but you know what? It could work here. Because the Coachella Valley has never had a sports team that they can call, like a professional sports team that they can call their own. Yes, they have like very minor independent baseball, and they have like high school teams, but they have nothing of this caliber. Nothing before 2022. So once the announcement was made, and once I realized how it was all going to work out with the Seattle Kraken, I was like, oh, I'm way more excited now. Like, the Kraken were doing everything right at the time. So I got to give props to the ownership group for Seattle. Got to give props to everyone that works behind the scenes, doing a fantastic job. And when I took the job here, I think I remember actually saying, I want to see this team grow. Like, I want to grow with the team, and I want the fan base to grow with the team. And my hope was that it would happen organically. And that's exactly what's happened. This fan base here at Coachella Valley has grown so organically and so wonderfully. And now we get packed crowds every night. 7, 8, 9,000. We've had a multitude of sellouts last season and this season. And this whole Coachella Valley has fallen in love with the Firebirds. The Golden Knights are a good example of a hockey team that can work in the desert, but the Coachella Valley Firebirds are definitely an example of a successful team that can work in the desert. So for those of you saying that hockey cannot work in the desert, for those of you saying that hockey cannot work in a non-traditional market like Anaheim or Coachella Valley or Las Vegas, are you kidding me? No, it absolutely can work in these areas. Look around. Look at this sign. You have Acrisure Arena. You have the Firebirds. You have the Kraken. It works in a desert environment. You look around, like, I implore a lot of you to come to playoff games this coming season, and you could see how much it has grown here. I mean, the fans and I have the repartee. I say 1 minute, they say thank you, it's great. There's like the call and response. The fans have grown so well here at the Coachella Valley. So well. It can work. If done right, it can work here. So it's not because hockey cannot work in the desert. It's because of failed ownership. It is because of everything else that has happened with the Coyotes. It is because of like the bankruptcy, the league stepping in. Alex Marullo is not making any friends. And I implore all of you to check out the Locked On Coyotes live podcast that they did Wednesday afternoon. They talk at great detail, much more great detail, about Alex Marullo, about the mistakes he's made, and, you know, about the fact that the Coyotes fans, a lot of them don't want a franchise like after 2-3 years if the Coyotes do move. I don't see it happening. They don't see it happening. If the Coyotes do move, I think that's it. I think that's going to be it for hockey in Arizona, and that is a damn shame. Those fans deserve better. They deserve way better. That's how I'm going to close this one out. Actually, I'll close out on a positive note. Anaheim. Those fans are just incredible. Like, the Ducks fan base, like, it's a cool fan base. They're knowledgeable. Y'all know what you're talking about. So hockey works here in Southern California. Non-traditional. It works. And it's going to continue to work. Mark my words. The Firebirds, they're in it for the long haul. The Ducks, they're in it for the long haul. They're not going anywhere. That's how I'm going to end this. With that being said, I want to thank all of you for your continued support. Thank you for listening. Yes, this was way off topic, but given the magnitude of the story, I think I had to talk about it, and I hope I did justice to it. So, Robin, if you're watching this, Locked On Coyotes, if you're watching this, I hope I was able to defend as much as possible, and I just hope nothing but the best for all my colleagues down in Arizona. So, just hoping for the best. I'm still supporting you guys, even though I sometimes joke around about the Phoenix Coyotes. I don't want to see it happen, and I feel bad about what's happening. All right, that's going to do it. Once again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, ad-free on Amazon, also on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter is at LO_Ducks. You can email me at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. And once again, thank you all for your continued support. It is so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there. Please be kind to one another. You know, be kind to the Coyotes fans because they deserve it. And Ducks fly together.